last word.
Good evening and welcome to The Last Word. Today we centralize our discussion about an emerging issue in Kenya, GBV and femicide. And our question today is: Kenya walking the talk in the fight against sexual and gender-based violence? And are we really on track to ensure that our Kenyans are safe and free to exist in this country? And in this today's show, we have our guest, Dr. Musoba Kitui, the Regional Director, IPAS Africa Alliance, and we have Sylvia Maina, Regional Gender Statistics Communications Specialist, UN Women, East and Central Africa. And we have our audience in the room that we'll be discussing with, and of course, my panelists, James Smart and Eric Latif. Good evening and welcome to the show. I believe we all have voting tags. And today's show will be a bit more different because we have to get into the perspective of what's happening. So we're sure of your card. Do we believe Kenya is on the walk of ending gender-based violence and femicide in Kenya? Can we see the vote?
Don't be afraid.
Don't be shy.
Raise it up. Red is no, green.
Red is no, green yes. For yes.
All right. How are we looking? We have some optimists.
Very few optimists.
Very few optimists.
And importantly, very big no's. 2024 marked the worst year in Kenya when it comes to femicide. And according to Silencing Women data by Odipodev and Africa Data Hub, 77% of the killings were committed by an intimate partner, which is intimate partner violence. 22% victims killed by a stranger or unknown. 72% of the femicides that were recorded happened at home. And the highest counties that are leading in femicide are Nairobi, Kiambu, and Nakuru, following up with, of course, very many other counties who have the same issue in different calamities. And often these cases are precedents of domestic violence. And according to the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, the killings by intimate partners are rarely spontaneous, and often they are not random. And so it should be examined as an extreme act on a continuum of gender-related violence that remains underreported and too often ignored. But most importantly, the cases of femicide have been characterized by brutal murder, from abuse, beatings, stabbings, beheadings in this very country of ours. And in the same data, stabbing is at 29%, hacking is by 15%, strangulation 10%, and the women aged 18 to 35 are covering 59% of this number. And when we go to the courts, we're seeing an average of 4 years of cases taking place in the courts. So is justice really served to the victims? But before then, I'd love us to do an experiment in our group. And with the same cards you voted, I would love to understand, is there a difference in Kenya between how men and women experience life as normal Kenyans? Yes for yes, in the green, red for no. Is there a difference between how we all experience life between men and women? Is there?
We have more greens.
We have more greens saying yes, right. There's a difference. And so you have a mic around you, and I think I'd want to hear and I'd want to understand, what are these differences? And gender-based violence is not a women versus men epidemic, no. But sustainably, the more issues of femicide happen more to women, and they also happen to men. But do we experience life differently? Let me hear from the audience. There's a mic somewhere. You go ahead.
I do believe there's a difference between how men and experience life in general. I'd like to give my answer in statistics, following a very, very interesting fact I saw from the UN, that technology facilitated gender-based violence victims are 99% women. I believe that's a very significant number and range, and quite clearly answers your question. Yes.
Thank you so much. Men, don't be shy with this question. You're safe. Go ahead.
All right. So for me, I think there's no much difference in how we share, we grow up as ladies and gentlemen. We have the same environment, and I feel like none should feel like there's that much different. We all have a same playing field. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm seeing a lot of nods. Yes, at the back.
Okay, my name is Brian Nyango.
Yeah.
What I feel about this, there is a very big difference because how, let's say for example, how the government or how the authority takes or how the authority decides to do the men when they misrole women is totally different. When women, we need to understand the fact that women can beat men. But when I decide that a woman has beaten me, and then I tell somebody that a woman beaten me, even the world will stand and ask how. So I think there is a very big difference. We are suffering through a lot, but we can't talk because how maybe let's say the cultural whatever, or how the community stood. Yeah.
Thank you so much. One more. I think we have a mic here. We have a mic on the front.
Okay, for me, I feel there's much difference. I feel like women are much exposed to GBV compared to men. Yeah.
Okay. One more. I think you wanted to say something as well. Then I can bring it back to my panel.
Yes. My opinion is that women and men have totally different experiences in how we are starting from the way you grow up, even how children are being nurtured. You'll realize the way a girl child is being brought up is very different from the way a boy child is being brought up. And so even when we become adults, whether even with the coming of technology and girl empowerment, I feel like somehow men, or rather some men, if not most, believe they'll always be superior to women, despite technology, despite girl empowerment. Some men still believe they are superior to women, and I think it's what is causing most cases of GBV and femicide at this rate. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, James, Latif, noticing that again, we have to structure the conversation for people to understand how differently this issue is. And GBV tends to happen, or rather patriarchy tends to punish both men and women. What are your thoughts?
I think we have to ground this conversation with certain sort of data points and nuances. And so we have to say, number one, that there's obviously a gender war going on, quote unquote, which comes from certain things. And the first data point goes to the pandemic. In 2020, we recorded a spike on domestic violence at home. Then what happened is simply this, that for the first time, these men, women had to share a small space. And someone quipped when I think one of the interviews, said, I looked at my partner and realized, I don't like this person at all, you know. Because then there's, I could go to work and, they go to work, we don't see each other, we just raise children and whatever that happens. So that is the first data point, the increase of violence in homes. And basically pandemic forced everyone to stay home. So there's an economic question to resolve on this gender wars or whatever that is. But I think I'd like to go a bit further, which I think is we don't appreciate a lot, and there's a governance question here. If you look at our statistics in East Africa, or the entire sort of Horn of Africa, Kenya is the country that has educated most girls than her neighbors, all right? Why is that? Between 1982 to 1998, there was an obvious policy from a government that built girls' school in every district, okay? And this is why you have all these Moi girls, whatever, okay? And we don't realize this, that this was a huge social change and a social leap, that for the first time, there was this idea and ability that boys and girls should be the same. So to your question, we grew up, everyone having this same experience. You can go to high school, all right? But that was not the norm for our previous generation before that. The previous generation before that, parents, grandparents, it is the men who went to school, it is the men who were given the priority. So while we changed that in terms of education, we didn't change that in terms of culture. So our culture still remained the same. So yes, you educate the boys and the girls the same, but then you still have this added thing that you need the girls to do.
Yeah.
Girls need to learn, you know, how to, you know, clean, how to cook, how to take care of men, whatever it is. But someone is educated, someone has a job, someone, you know, goes to interviews like everyone else and can qualify to be, I don't know, the commercial director. So all of us are commercial directors. So who goes home and cooks and becomes a challenge and a problem. And I think our problem really is the social change or the social leap that we did, our inability to put it in our societal structures. And that's a governance question and a governance problem. That communally, we're like, well, I accept women, females at work, but then they go home, it's like they should do a bit more. You know, the ones who take care of children, the ones who, you know, should do the cleaning, they're the ones who do all those things. And then creates this imbalance of gender that now we have on the flip side of, you know, to mention their names, of men who feeling we are left behind. So we need to have a correct frame, you know, don't lean in too much, you know, so that you look like you're, you know, you're being subservient to the female. And I think all these things are the two constructive of how do we make sure that the societal leap that we did, you know, years ago reflects on what happens with our lives today. And if there is any structural sort of things to be made, adjustments, then we do them as a community.
I completely agree with you. The structural adjustment program come back. The question that you asked, and I think it's a fundamental question, is there a difference between how men and women experience life in Kenya? Experience life, like between the moment a man woke up and the average man woke up this morning and now, and the moment the average woman woke up this morning and now, there's a difference. There's a difference in how we experience life. And it's all those examples we've had here, it's not because the foundations are different. I think if you look at just the structural foundations, just the basic ones, access to education, access to, you know, the basics in life. You come from a home that you'll be given access to food, shelter, clothing. If a majority of Kenyans are in the average age of 20, then they have grown up in an era where they actually, the boys and girls at home are being treated equally as they grow up. But then there's a socio-cultural issue, and I like the way Smart has put it. There's a socio-cultural issue that we still have it. And it's very, very deep. It's embedded. There's an expectation of the man to be the provider and the protector and the defender. There's a, you know, expectation of the woman to be the nurturer, the one that is, you know, taking care of the daily life. And that heavy burden on the minds of both these genders then plays a big role, I think, in what happens. You will see today, even the professional woman today will still feel a lot more that she has a responsibility with the children who are at home, and whether they have gone to school, whether they have eaten, what's for dinner tonight, are the kids doing their homework, more than the man feels as a natural, you know, responsibility. The natural responsibility is there for the man, yeah, but the woman wants to actually be there, right? And there's that social expectation the woman will do that, then the man will not do that. And I think like you're saying, Smart, in that period where there's lockdown and all, we have various pressure points emerging. So you, the provider, why is there provision? There's an expectation that you're going to do that, so you start feeling inadequate.
You're failing.
You're failing. And you, the nurturer, I mean, I've just noticed that these kids are using bad words here. So what have you been doing, you know? So all these pressures start coming up. There's an area where I sort of disagree with Smart when he says we fix this with governance. And I think that part of the problems that we've been having with GBV is going over governance and forgetting just the natural fabric. How do we fix that social issue? Governance will come up with policy and law. And the policy and law will tell us, yes, you can, men and women have equal opportunity to get employment, yes. You know, any form of violence on male or female is punishable by law, yes. But that has not addressed that issue of who the man is, who the woman is, who the boy is, who the girl is, and the social expectation of those. That has to be a more social issue. I don't know how, but I don't think laws will sort this thing out. Laws will actually keep creating more clashes.
I find it very interesting. Being the only lady here again, I am continuously triggered. Why? It's because I feel like we are very, very much out of reality with what is really happening with women. Patriarchy is systemic. Do you realize you both suffer from patriarchy more than we do? Because patriarchy tends to use men to fuel it. And patriarchy is abusive. And I feel like the negotiations of basic human rights and responsibilities that keep defining what a woman is and what a man is, we don't even live in an economy where a woman can do what a woman should be doing and a man can do what you should be doing. You have households where the economy is so unstable, both of you need to go to work. So then if I have to go to work and my partner has to go to work, then who remains in the household? The social cultural aspects of how women and men live is also very different. Right now we have technologically facilitated gender-based violence, whereby I can wake up and I can have a deep fake image of myself, pornographic, etc., trending without my consent, and I had nothing to do about it. But when it comes to the public, no one will recognize a chance for me to actually explain myself, other than I will be given so many terminologies of the same. Equally, economic injustices, environmental injustices, war continuously puts the woman at the brink of suffering more than men. And I'm not saying that men don't suffer these issues. Again, patriarchy it's us versus the patriarchy. Patriarchy exists in systems where men continue to be given roles that make you feel as if you're supposed to be outside and there's supposed to be somebody taking care of you when you're back home and your children. Whereas we were all in an African society whereby everybody had a responsibility to not only raise the children, but raise members of the society better. Like we had community systems of care. Now we don't. The economy does not even allow us to have spaces for us to commune together. You don't even have time. You're in a 9-to-5 job that requires you at home and you're tired, you want to get some rest, right? So, but as we get into this, and I think I can get to talk about this the whole day because it's my job. But Musoba, Doc, you work in this front line, and I want people to find it very, very impressive and very important that you're a man working in this space. What have you seen differently? And I think for you, can you help us understand the structural and cultural systems that make GBV predictable rather than accidental?
Thank you very much for having me. A great pleasure to be here, and also humbled as a man to be invited to talk about the challenge of SGBV. I think what we see is we have a plethora of laws and policies, and I want to agree with Rick that we have so many laws, and the biggest challenge is that they're not implemented. So if we just implemented the laws and the guidelines and the frameworks we have as a country, we would not have SGBV happen. But these laws are not implemented. And the question we have to ask is why. I think it's very easy to wonder if we are walking the talk. But I think for me, I would probably try even to problematize that question in the first place. The question is, are we even having the right talk in the first place? Because I think we are caught up in this very symptomatic diagnosis of what SGBV is and the relationships and the day-to-day realities. But for us to really have a good conversation and good solutions, we have to get to, I think, the psychological heart of SGBV. And the question we have to ask, especially as men, is why was violence necessary? Why was violence against women and girls necessary? I think it goes to their primary assumption there that men have always deemed themselves superior to women. And also the other assumption has been that the world is a man's place, and everything in the world, including women and girls, exists to his service. And so violence, in a way, is a technology of enforcing that assumption, is a way of enforcing and coercing subservience and coercing the woman and the girl to be in service of man. And I think for me that is the code that all men either consciously or subconsciously live by. And so we live by code. And so when we see this violence popping up, is that code that we've never really gone to the depth of it and interrogated it. So we can throw laws at it and frameworks and guidelines and trainings and conversations around our responsibilities and everything else. But I think for me, for us to really have a very meaningful conversation and a solution forward, I think we have to go back down and interrogate that code that we live by around the superiority of men over women and around everything in the world existing in service of that.
Doc,
and that's what we call patriarchy.
In the very same discussion, we notice a whole chain when you go to most boys' schools, for example, because again, the question always comes up, how do we involve men in this space whereby we protect women? Because it's supposed to be literally natural for defenders of the society to defend us, right? But aside from that, we see structures of violence appropriated in high schools whereby the strongest boy in school is the one who could beat everybody up, right? So there's a very common association of strength with violence.
Not necessarily.
That cascades to society. Not exactly?
Not necessarily.
Which school are you in, James?
If you can't beat them, you organize how they can be beaten.
Violence. Still violence. Why do we see this replica? Why do we see this replica everywhere? Political violence, economic violence. I mean, look at our neighbors, Congo, Sudan. When the war began between the RSF, it went into SGBV as well. Why is there such a replica of violence everywhere?
So when you look at society, how society has been organized, violence has played a very critical role in sustaining the power relations in society. So when you look at all the relational systems of the world, they are sustained by violence. So whether it is the rulers of the world, whether it's the coercive power of government, government rules because of the violence that it has. It has monopoly. It has a monopoly of violence, as we call it as well. So many relational systems of the world we exist in exist because of violence. And so SGBV happens to be one of that technology as well that exists within all the systems that we have. Many cultures also teach that violence, and so we codify that into our children. When they grow up, we socialize our boys. Even our religious institutions as well, whether it's churches or mosques as well, we socialize that normalization of violence in some form or another. And sometimes it's very easy to focus on the big violences and the femicide and everything else. But I think for us to have good conversations, you also have to pay attention to the day-to-day microaggressions that happen in society. So many women who are actually killed, they were telltale signs. They were slapped. Maybe there was another microaggression as well. Even women who end up surviving SGBV, there's usually a history of that. But then we as society fail to pick up on those telltale signs, those microaggressions, to deal with that up front. So I think for me the biggest challenge actually is at the community level. How do we, as communities, take responsibility to do things differently?
Yeah, so I was going to add something, and I know we are getting into an agreement or disagreement to problematize the question of governance, and I have to qualify this. Everything rises and falls with governance, all right? Who enforces that if today you go and beat up someone, that's a mistake? Who does that? It's the code that is enforced by governance, right? And the government system. So if we allow them to say that the people we elect and put in office don't have a responsibility on how our social construct eventually evolves, then we are suggesting that there is another structure of governance or a code that we sign up to, which does not exist. So I'll say this. Kwame Nkrumah said, and his whole principle was, seek ye first the political kingdom, and then all else shall be added to you. It therefore follows that the people you elect and put in office go in such a huge stretch to determine what kind of social structure we end up with. All right? Yeah. That's just the truth. So as much as we'd like to divorce governance and the people who eventually can enforce the laws and make sure that we live within a society that has certain construct that we know, like if I take a wrong turn, all right, on a road, I get punished. If we don't do that, then we are putting this other thing that our political class like, and maybe it's something that they've infected us with, give us the solution to this thing. So a whole government shows up, all ministers would be here and tell us, give us solution as the people. So why are you in office in the first place? If you're asking everyone to give a solution. So I really sign out from that sort of enabling environment where we're allowing the people who have the responsibility of making sure that if someone does something wrong in our republic, they get punished and say, it is because our society is broken. Maybe we need, boys to be talked to by older men in the society. Or we need, women to be talked to because now they are not, paying attention. I think we need to put the place of governance straight if we belong in this society. That's so I was just adding another layer to it.
Thank you, James. I want to bring Sylvia. I think she should be able to bring this into aspect. But also, Sylvia, I think this is the same country where we had the Kware massacre. And we had a perpetrator arrested and apparently disappeared from the police station. I think we've seen that in so many cases whereby people are arrested and then they disappear from the hands of government. So what do you think is the reason why GBV and just violence against women predominantly, it's rendered a social issue often rather than a national security and a human rights emergency? What makes it so hard for the government to acknowledge this as a security crisis? And I know the UN Women has done so much work in this space. Why is it so difficult to convince member states that femicide is literally a national emergency?
That's a really good question, and I love what you've said about it actually being a human rights crisis. That's exactly what it is. And it's actually one of the most prevalent, if not the most prevalent, forms of human violations globally, right? So this is not just an issue that Kenya is grappling with. As to why we have trouble pinpointing and saying this is the issue, this is where it starts, this is where it ends. It's a complex issue and it's very multifaceted and multi-layered. So it's difficult to unravel the thread and say this is where it begins. And if I pull this, now the whole thing will come into line. And I do agree with James. A strong element of governance, but I also do agree with Doc that it's really also very strongly hinged on laws and really how we're able to legislate around this. It's around policies, but I think we can't leave it only at the community or the legislative level. This is something that starts in the House, right? And even these people we have up in Parliament or wherever else in public policy making, public leaders, we always say they're a reflection of ourselves. You know how we say we have the leaders we deserve? And it really is true. So as much as the laws really do need to catch up with the speed of femicide, and in this 16 days of activism against GBV, which is celebrated globally annually, started on 25th of November on the day of International Day against International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls, and it ends on very aptly on December 10th on Human Rights Day. So we're right in the middle of that period actually, and this time we're thematizing it around technologically facilitated GBV. And what's the reason for this? Even as I digress a little bit, it's because of course we're in the digital space and we're finding TFGBV is actually moving at a very alarming speed, and it's outpacing how even laws are being put in place. It's outpacing a lot of knowledge and the nimbleness, right, that we have as societies, as even homesteads. I'm a mother of teen boys, and it's not easy to keep up with whatever they're looking at online. You know, you think you're looking at their WhatsApps, they're not on WhatsApp, they're on Snapchat, and there's the other one, I never remember the name. There's another one which it's difficult to trace what anyone is saying in their chats. So it's the same thing that's happening with what you're talking about with doxing, with the deep fakes. And when you look at the deep fakes, even globally, you find actually more than 90% are all about portraying women sexually, right, in a very negative way. So even as we say that men are victims or survivors of GBV, we don't dispute that at all. Yes, I know UN Women, we're all about gender equality and women's empowerment, but really gender is about both men and women, right? And as much as we don't dispute that there's GBV against men, even the data points that has so articulately shared at the beginning of this show that it's overwhelmingly women who are the victims of GBV, and this is global. It's not just since COVID, it's not just in the past couple of years, it's been a pattern. And this is the year that we're actually 30 years post-Beijing, right? Because Beijing was in September 95, right? Of course in China, and it was the largest such forum for women's rights and girls' equality and all that. And even 30 years later, yes, you're right, we're looking at much more progress in terms of education. We're looking at much more women in public spaces. Of course, we know Rwanda is our regional darling, with 61% of parliament is comprised of women, which is the highest in the world, right? But many other countries are struggling. I know Kenya, we've still been talking about the 2/3 since the 2010 constitution was brought into play, right? So it's really a mixed bag. But one of the things that we find is really a continued and persistent struggle is GBV. And really we need to talk about violence. And one of the things we are seeing at the UN in general and with UN Women is we're calling it pushing back or pushing forward against a pushback. So I think more than 90% of countries globally, according to recent data, have parliaments have reported a pushback on gender equality and other such forward movements, right? So the question is why? And instead of seeing women's equality being mainstreamed, we're actually seeing a mainstreaming of misogyny, right? Just before we started, I was asking Sharon, why does the world seem to hate women, you know? And some of the feedback we've gotten even in previous similar shows that we've done is you see a lot of young people, and it bothers me that it's largely Gen Zs and young millennials who are coming forward and saying it's because you people have brought in Western ideals, you people have brought too much feminism, so men are angry. Men are feeling emasculated or disempowered. Men and boys feel that women have been over-empowered. But again, let's look at the numbers. And even the data is being questioned, because when you bring the data, they say, where did you get that? Or who verified that data? But a lot of the data we're looking at is government data. Like if you look at Kenya National Bureau of Statistics data, this is 2022 data. And this is our official statistics, so we cannot argue, you know. It says that up to 33% of Kenyan women have experienced sexual violence. But when you look at the same numbers for men, it's 7% depending on the age bracket, and for the same age bracket, it's more than double for women. So whichever way you slice it, it's women who are facing this. When you look at technology-facilitated GBV again, globally, women are the ones who are mostly affected, yeah? So even when we, there was another point I wanted to put across, but I think it has escaped me now. But when we look at what are some of the issues...
You can hold to that thought.
I can go to that thought.
You can hold it, because I want you to hold it so that you remember it.
Great.
All right?
Sure.
Because I'm about to take a short break for everyone, and all your thoughts and break. When we come back, I want to hear now from everyone on how we land this conversation. Okay, the data point, how do we make sure that then we have this conversation as a community? And to be honest and to be fair, what is the starting point for all of us? We all know where the problem is. We all know, and we can point to the data, but what is my personal responsibility to starting the conversation? How do we live in a society that sees us as equals and make sure that we all have the same opportunities, but advances every individual's right, as it were, as enshrined in the Constitution? You're watching The Last Word. We'll be right back after this short break. Don't go too far. Welcome back. You're watching The Last Word. I should say, lo and behold, we are back. You're watching The Last Word. We were in a period just before we took the break of agreeing and organizing the facts on, you know, how much violence women face vis-a-vis men, and then we agreed that, well, we can go through the facts, we can agree what the facts are, but still, there's a place at a point for all of us as a people and as a community to say, where do we start in resolving this question? I see the doc has the mic, but I know you also have something to say. So let me allow the doc to sort of bring us to order. Where do we start?
So let me say three things. The first one, I think, is the enforcement of the existing laws that we have. That has to be paramount. So I think I agree with you to some extent. And from a governance perspective, the idea should not be about creating new laws. Can we enforce the one that exists? And so I think the role of the law enforcement organs really is critical on that one as well. The second thing that I think is important is to go to the community level and have these conversations around how gender-based violence is normalized in our society and how we can prevent it. And I think I liked one thing that you say, that we all have an individual responsibility. And it could be the chief in the village, it could be the husband if we're starting at the household level, or it could be the wife as well, you could be the family members, church leaders or religious leaders in the different communities, it could be the neighbor, it could be family members. Each of us has a huge, huge responsibility to actually ensure that SGBV doesn't happen. We do not witness it, we do not turn a blind eye to it as well, but that it's actually handled as well and enforced. So the responsibility for safeguarding women and protecting women has to be a shared responsibility. So if a woman dies in your neighborhood or beaten in your neighborhood and you are there and witnessing and you're not doing anything about it, I think you should be very ashamed of yourself and you should really go and reflect on your responsibility in society. So I think for me that's important. The third one, I think I want to insist, we really have to go to the psychological heart of SGBV and interrogate that element. Why is violence necessary in this age and time? Regardless of the factors, I think we have to ask, why are men triggered to be violent to the extent that they are violent? What is that thing that makes them so fragile, so on the edge, that missing a meal, not being cooked for a meal, being told no, being rejected, being told this is over, necessitates violence. So that male fragility, I think it's something that has to be dealt with, and it's responsibility of men to organize and have conversations among themselves around that fragility that we experience as men as well, and help the boys to grow up and show up differently than to live by code. So I'll stop with those three things and hopefully...
Right. Very well said. Where's the microphone? Let's hand it back to this side. Why are you fragile? Give the man the microphone. Please stand. Why are you fragile? What is it that is bruising the men's ego?
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Innocent Wanyonyo Tuma. You see, they say that it is not enough for justice to be done. Justice should be seen to be done. I have worked at the gender office. I was an intern. Okay, an attaché at the gender office at Rongai police station, and I could see that people could come to report these cases and action could be done. That's okay, and that's why, in my view, I feel like that the government has done enough to walk the talk in this, in fighting sexual and gender-based violence. But my problem is in fact with the people. The problem is with us the citizens, and us as other people, because it is not enough for the government to have all these laws, for example, the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act of 2014 and other laws, yet we ourselves don't follow. For example, and I'll be quick, in our hostels and where we live as students, I think a majority of us, if not all of us, have experienced this either by hearing or others have in fact suffered from the gender-based violence, beaten by their boyfriends or even their girlfriends. But most of the time the memo is always mambo ya watu wawili usiingilie. I think that is the mindset that we need to overcome. We need to know that when we hear violence somewhere, it's okay for us to enter into those rooms and call it out. We have to have that change of mindset. The other thing and the last thing is the government should, it's not enough for those offices to be there, yet people are not seeing those offices. People should know that there's a gender office. People should know that if you are beaten or rather if you experience violence, you can go report. People should know the consequences of the same. And ideally, there's nothing like a toxic relationship, because I think for us, especially Gen Zs, we have romanticized those things. That is an illegal relationship. Step out. Thank you.
All right. Very well said. Where's the microphone on this side? Please pass the microphone at the back. Yes, the gentleman with...
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Tom Juma. I'm a mechanical engineer and a researcher. The question about gender-based violence and sexual harassment is so complex. And it's increasing because of superiority changes. In the previous context, we were viewing a man as a superior being because they were brought up to provide for the women. But currently, women are also empowered. We have even seen women becoming even governors. So I think for us to eliminate the violence aspect is the fact that we need to start training our boys to view women as partners, not organisms to entertain them. And the next thing that we need to
organisms.
see... Yeah. I think if you look at the biblical stories of creation, women were created to entertain the man and make him happy.
Which, according to what?
The biblical story of creation.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So the next thing that I want to talk about on the violence aspect is that, for me, I believe that the country is moving ahead to protect us against gender-based violence. But the problem is our behaviors. You see, when it's a gender-based relationship, people invest feelings. But tell me, in the current generation, do we have a lady with only one boyfriend, or do we have a man with only one girlfriend? So that is one behavior. The next thing is that we have commercialized sex. And these are things that escalate the issue. And to add on top, on the sexual harassment side, I've been to Europe and I've compared their laws that are governing the sexual relationship between a man and a woman. The consenting aspect. In Kenya, a no could mean yes. But in Europe, a yes means yes, and a no means...
Who cultivates that response where a no means yes?
Men.
Okay.
And the same men, I'm just imagining if a lady comes to your house and he undresses and then later say no, and you give in. What will happen?
What will you give in when somebody has told you no?
The same lady will blame you. Yes. So, but in Europe, if you look at them, they are so organized that the consenting aspect is well protected, that a lady is protected up to the point that she can say no, even in the process of the act.
Okay.
And then the last thing that I want to say is that most of these sexual harassments, the women are more protected than the men. Currently, there is a character who has died in the sexual harassment aspect, the sexual context. I don't want to mention the name because it's a public figure. And what is circulating in the air is the blue pill, that the man used blue pills to add energy. I'm assuming it was the lady who died in the act. What could be spreading in media? There is a character, a man who impregnated 4 ladies, and the ladies called the man in a closed door and canned him. What if it is the lady who has been dating 4 men and the 4 men approach her for caning? What could be happening? So those are my points that need to be investigated in deeper, and to understand the laws, how they can protect our consenting aspect, our behaviors, and the superiority level.
Okay, please hand the microphone to her, please. Kindly help us. We're in the woods and the weeds as it is currently.
At this point, we need to bring in the research and development department, because all he's saying is up to research. But what he has said that we need to discuss is that GBV is mostly sexual, okay? And it's coming as a result of men's inability to receive a no from women. So it's that we need to discuss deeper. Anytime you tell a man no, it becomes a question of as who, okay? And it's not even an economic question, because there are women who provide for men and the men still end up being violent with them. So the patriarchy made men so entitled to women's bodies to the point that they will not receive any answer except compliance from women. Another thing is that when it comes to gender-based violence, let's not assume that the government has done enough. Because when you walk into the police station today and you tell the police officer at the reporting desk that somebody has slapped me, he's my boyfriend, and I'm here to report, they're like, wapi alama? True experience, wapi alama? And if you don't have like extreme signs that you have been actually brutalized, it becomes a non-issue at the police station, at the report desk. And that's what happens a lot when it goes to governance. And then another thing is women in the society, we are attacked in the home situation. That's why it becomes very hard for women to actually go out there and open it up, because it becomes like you're breaking the core structure of society, the family, by trying to report it. And another thing that people do not know is that you who's hearing the violence, you who's seen somebody being violated, you have a legal mandate. Actually, the government allows you. There's that responsibility of the people of the society when it comes to reporting GBV. I can report GBV on behalf of somebody else, and the government can take act on behalf of that person, even though I am not the victim. So the society made us think that I have to be the victim to report, and that's what makes the entire thing an issue of emotions. Because if I'm in the abuse, I do not want to get out because of the mix of chemistry and all that drama. But when somebody else does it, the society now should come in and take up the role of rescuing victims from toxic environments.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Yvonne. I also represent the Revolutionary Students Commission, and I actually disagree with you. The police is not doing enough. Last year there was a case where a woman actually reported being violated by the husband, and she was sent home. Less than a week later, she turned out dead, killed by the husband. Are they really doing enough? Okay, to you, the Bible says the woman should help the man, not do whatever you said. Okay. Also, I say that how we stop this starts from the home. If you're a father to a son, then the son will do what you do. If you beat your wife, then your son will also beat his wife or his girlfriend. So start from the home. What you teach your children is what they will do. So respect should go both ways. If you're arguing with your wife, take it to the bedroom. Do not do it in front of your children, because when you do that, they will also do it. Like, they will see as if you can command mom in front of me, you can hit mom in front of me, so I will also hit my girlfriend because it is right. Also, what was I to say? I've forgotten, but yeah.
All right, where's the microphone here? Let's hand the microphone to the back.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Clinton Okello. I'm a nurse graduate from KISS University. So my question is, why do we have to have this topic when there is an upsurge of femicidal cases or sexual and gender-based violence? I think we are treating this thing as a trending topic instead of treating this matter as a constant emergency. We need to deal with this matter when we have cases of gender-based violence or not, because when we treat this matter after maybe so many people have died, like death is irreversible. So we need to treat this matter as a constant emergency, not as a training topic. Thank you.
All right. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Nyongesa, student of Multimedia University of Kenya. I'm doing psychology, and I'm also film director. My perspective of this is GBV. Is that maybe I'll want to share a psychological perspective of this whole thing. That is, the victims and the perpetrators, it's not that the courts and staffs and the police need to solve this thing, but these people need to heal psychologically. That is because psychologically, people learn violence because of what they've been seeing since childhood, and they've normalized that violence as just something normal in life. Now, wakikuwa watu wakubwa, they'll tend to do the same thing that they've seen maybe their parents or staff doing the same. Now, they'll come and apply the same to their wives and stuff like that. Now, these people need to heal psychologically before you can even take them to court or stuff like that, because there's a lot of trauma associated with that. Now, I would say lazima wa heal psychologically. No, maybe men, the same men don't open up until say I'm a heal psychologically. No, atakuwa na that power of opening up his issues to the respected healing groups. Thank you.
Okay, hang on.
Let's just hang on, yeah? I've tried to control my... I want to go back here. Do you understand you woke up and gave us a difference between a woman having 4 boyfriends and a man impregnating 4 women? Do you understand the complexity of what that is? Okay. I want to bring everyone to perspective because I don't think we understand. I know we do, right? We're all intellectuals here. Do we understand how grievous the situation of femicide and gender-based violence is in Kenya? Do we understand that early last year we lost Rita Waeni, a university student who was beheaded? Do we understand that Scarlett Wahu was murdered by somebody in a house and later on the entire public condemned her because apparently she was a socialite? Do we understand that during the protest, when people were busy insulting politicians, what pictures did we see politicians being put as? Women. Do we understand that this is a country that had 170 women killed by January last year? Do we recognize that we are surrounded by neighbors where gender-based violence is a predominant method of war in Congo and Sudan? Do we understand that the fabric of society is dead in this country because we also had presidential pardons pardoning a pedophile? Do we? So when we talk about gender-based violence, it's not a men versus women situation. Sodomy cases and pedophilia in Kenya are skyrocketing. Child sex trafficking is happening. We saw the case in Mai Mahiu. We are at a dead end, guys. Femicide is so real. We're losing women every day, children every day, men every day. It is us versus these criminals. It is us versus systems that continue to murder our society. Just let that settle in, James.
Martin, where do we go
said.
from here?
And very well put. Every time, because I mean, these are daily conversations that we keep having in our society. There is violence, and we see and we agree. I mean, already we agree that there is violence. There's violence that should not happen. The laws deal with the violence after it has happened and try to work on structures that will prevent the violence from happening. Are those laws adequate? The society does not want, in my view, to really address this issue. And that's why we keep pushing it into somebody else should take it up. And are we ready to actually address those things that are happening in our society and asking ourselves what's going on? And we have conversations that move beyond what would appear like a blame, but actually addressing and confronting that this we shall deal with as we even bring up the younger generations. We have the alphas now. The betas are going to be born soon. How do we raise those betas in a way that the Gen Beta does not behave like the Gen X? That those ones will behave remarkably different in how they are raised and how they think. Is it how we address that? I want to ask the question, and maybe you can just take it by, show of the cards. Do you think we are inherently violent? Like, do you have a propensity to violence as you, as an individual? Do you think that you have a propensity to violence? Like, sayu ukijamtu, the first thing you want to do is slap someone. Yeah? Yes, no. Red, no is green is yes.
Be honest.
Do we have a propensity to violence?
Yeah.
Right? On a daily basis, is your default violence? Okay, you see, society does not want to answer some of these questions. we have to confront these questions, right? And if I hazard, many of us will say that I am not inherently violent. Well, we have a violent streak, all of us, but it's not the default. You not default to violence when you have an issue to deal with. Right. We do not see people just fighting all over. There are cases where we see instances where incidences of violence spike because of other factors. Maybe those are the factors we should be asking ourselves, what are these factors that contribute to violence in general and then gender-based violence? What are these things that make people just become violent? What are these things that make people then become violent to their partner, intimate partner? Violence, gender-based violence, statistics are showing us mostly with intimate partners. So they're not happening in public. You're not walking around and finding people, gender-based violence happening. In fact, you will see that most likely, if somebody started beating up a woman in the public will be, hey, stop, right? It will be faster for people to come and start and stop this fight than if two men were fighting or two women were fighting, right? If it's man beating woman, there will be society trying to react to something publicly. But then we know that this violence happens a lot privately. What are these things that lead to this violence happening privately? There's patriarchy and the structure of patriarchy and how, it's been brought up. How do we deal with that? How can you tell me that somebody who was born in 2002 has grown up in this era, has grown up in going to school with both girls and boys, has grown up in an era where even job advertisements say there's equal opportunity, you can apply for a job and all those things, but then they'll end up with that violence.
I think,
what is it?
I think that if we stretch it, I think our society is deeply violent. We just spoke about goons the other day.
It's been 3 decades of war in this continent.
And I think if you look at how violence then presents itself, is many people are beaten at home.
Yep.
So that they can, you did not wash your cup. Here's a slap. You didn't wear the shoes properly. So I think our society is violent, and violence as a mechanism on correcting behavior then is institutionalized in the family unit, and the family unit is the best way we know how to take care of our children. Your child is very well behaved. That means the parents are tyrants in that house, right? That they make sure that children are very well behaved. And then if you expand it then outside the family to school, the schools that performed better were everyone was being marshaled from their dormitories to class, at 4 in the morning or whatever it is. What was that? That is violence, And so because we know the only way how this society, and I mean you can stretch it back to the Mau Mau era on how the whole country sort of finds its way on how to negotiate its way for governance. I think there's layers of violence that is underneath, and it's how we are sort of brought up in family setting, school setting, work setting, that these things, maybe we need to have a conversation about how traumatized we are as a people, that we don't see this as violence, but then it presents itself in other scenarios, that it is fine for you to listen to someone being beaten up in your own neighborhood. You're like, yeah, that is their problem, because you all understand it. You're like, this happens in homes. And perhaps maybe that's what we need to do. And I don't know whose function that is. Is it a function of some debates, a function for media, a function for places where we meet for worship, places if we meet for gatherings? I don't know where that place is, but I think we have to make an admission that we live in a deeply violent society. It just spreads in different places, and we just don't see it as violence until someone says, men and women, this is a problem. But then men and women at home, it is fine. Beating up children, your own children, is fine. I think that is maybe the thing that underneath it all.
I have a question, James. In the case of femicide, for those ones who don't know, the intentional killing of men is called androcide. In the cases of femicide and androcide, the definitions are defined by the intentional killing of these individuals. So there's a structure of violence, of course, predominantly in our societies. But where do we character frame? Because it's premeditated. Before you kill a woman, you have planned it. Home is the best place. There's a knife in this corner. She will say this thing, I will do this. I'm so used to beating her. She's very much used, or vice versa. Where do we structure accountability? Who holds accountability when people die due to GBV? And I think maybe Doc, you can also help us. Who holds the accountability for this? Because the police system is failed. The judicial system takes you 4 years to even get a hearing. The hospitals have no gender. Right now, you pay for the P3s. Everywhere you look, we are in an unbreathable corner. Who takes accountability, Doc?
Where's the microphone? It has disappeared.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If it goes back to what Jen said, I think that's a governance issue. And I think the primary solution is to define femicide as a
The mic is off, sir. Sorry. I think we can have the other mic.
1, 2, 3 mic testing. I think it's working. It was off. Yeah, well, I think femicide should be recognized as a distinct gender-based crime and not just a murder. I think there's a governance role there, to be honest, that the state must define what femicide is and the consequences for that as well. It's an extreme form of gender-based violence that I think as a society we've not engaged with this. So I think for me defining that really is important. I think the second thing should be, I think gender-based violence and the history of gender-based violence should be considered as an aggravating factor for decisions around femicide, for example, in courts as well. But by the time femicide happens, we should acknowledge that we as society have failed that woman many times before. Maybe she said no to something and we as society, we turned a blind eye to it. Maybe she was beaten once. We as friends around her told her, you can do this and go back. And maybe family sent her back to the house and everything else. By the time femicide happens, there's been plenty of telltale signs. So I think it goes primarily to really dealing with the violence of society. And the question we have to ask is, what do women want really? Women want just freedom and rights.
Safety.
They want safety. They want freedom over their bodies. They want freedom over their choices. They want freedom over who they relate with. They want freedom of movement. They want freedom of voice. So these basic rights that we take so for granted as men in society, women are just laying an equal claim to them as well. So if we can really go down to that and make sure that that happens in our communities, in social systems and everything else, then we will not have to deal with femicide. Because by the time femicide happens, I think let's acknowledge we have failed that woman or that girl
several times.
So many times upstream.
Sylvia, to you as well, who holds the accountability of this issue primarily? I mean, like Doc was saying, you barely can go to school and to church and to wherever and come back home safely. You're not sure. Who holds accountability for this? Who do we blame?
I know. I think I really agree with what we've said. Like, can we start with blaming ourselves?
Yeah.
We failed ourselves as a society, because when you talk about who here has an inherent predisposition towards violence, none of us wants to own up. But the truth is, actually, the reason we have such a high level also of violence is because we are what we tolerate. And even when we've done studies in Kenya and even the region, East and Southern Africa, we find that it's actually a very high tolerance for GBV, including SGBV. We know we don't recognize marital rape, for example. Many countries have it in their laws in the region, but again, culturally, even the policeman will ask you, Ni bwanako, what do you mean he raped you? Like, I mean, didn't he send cows in a certain direction? So there's no such thing as marital rape. So you find there's a very high tolerance, surprisingly, even among women. Many of them think that it's actually okay for the husband to slap them because they burnt the food, or because they left the house without asking for permission, or because they went to visit their relatives without his permission. So I think the issue is tolerance, and what we tolerate is really what we are. Yeah, if you look at the Nordic countries, for example, there's some things that are just not tolerated. So I don't really think it's an issue of us being inherently violent. It's just we've normalized it, right? And like when we make sex a weapon of war, then it becomes the norm. That's just the thing. And then when you talk about why are women having kind of the short end of the stick, one of the issues is not being empowered enough. So I know on the other side I had said that men and young men feel that women are over-empowered, but when you look at the data again, in Kenya, during COVID, the level of empowerment was about 29 or 27%. And this is from the first Women Empowerment Index that was done by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. So again, official government data together with our support. But when we did the same study just earlier this year, we find the number has gone up a bit, which is very encouraging. We're now at about 40% of women are empowered. But if you look at University of Nairobi or any other major university here, and you look at the MBA class, you'll be deceived that women are very highly empowered, because you'll find very many women in those classes. But have we looked at the rural areas? Have we looked at the other intersectionalities, women with disabilities, maybe women, I don't know, who are stay-at-home parents. And when Latif was talking about the disproportionate burden of unpaid care and domestic work on women, the studies that we have, again, with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, is women are doing up to 5 times more unpaid care and domestic work in Kenya. And these are sometimes women who are in the market as well working. So what does that mean for our mental health and things like that? I'll go again and look at poverty, because you find that usually economically disempowered women tend to find themselves again facing a lot of SGBV and physical violence. And someone in the crowd who said that sexual GBV is actually higher than physical. It's true. The data we have from COVID time, again, official data, is that I think it was 35% for sexual GBV, but 17% for physical violence. So really, SGBV is double. But again, when you look at poverty, like I'm saying, that's one of the things that really determines whether women have voice, whether women have agency. In studies done in Africa, across the region, we find that for every 100 men who are living in extreme poverty, you have at least 127 women. Right? So what does that say? Women can't stand up for themselves. Women can't easily say no without being smacked. I want to just make one more short point. We can't ignore the issue of the manosphere, which is changing how we think, how we behave, our very fiber. Yeah, and for me, I think that answers the question of why are we finding a much higher rate of femicide among the younger generation, who to me know much better. I mean, I'm a Gen X, and I keep telling my Gen Z children, I expect you to know more than me. Right? You have much more opportunity, you're more exposed. So why are you doing poorer than we are doing as a generation? So maybe another time we can talk about the manosphere, but that's a huge issue that we cannot ignore.
I want to ask again the question. So you're asking who takes responsibility after the violence has happened?
Who is generally accountable for the safety of the people of this country? Because it's not the police, it's not the healthcare spaces. So who exactly, we're now at the epitome of death now. Who exactly bears this burden?
At the point of death? At the point after death?
Yeah, at this point, at the point of death, because that's the statistics we're dealing with.
Okay. You know that by the time we're dealing with the statistic of at the point of death, we have very many other cases of violence that are leading up to that death.
Yes.
Which is why I say there's government and the government institutions that we have established that of course take the primary accountability for it, responsibility. But I want to come back into how do we prevent it? We've got to deal with it as a society, as people. Government is not going to come and create structures if people don't buy into those structures. Government will not force structures upon people.
Which is very interesting, Eric, because when you see a case of SGBV, even with media, who gets the biggest burden of being showcased in the case? Is it the perpetrator or the victim?
It's usually the victim.
Okay.
And that's why I'm saying society, right?
But you see, structures already exist to ensure that there's literally no accountability to the perpetrator.
Those are the ones that we need to deal with. You see, that's the problem. So what's the solution to the problem? We've got to accept that there's a structure that is letting violence to happen.
Yeah.
Right? There's a structure that's letting violence to happen. Like what Sylvia just said, that there is in this region, in this part, in this country, there is a high tolerance to violence. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal in such a way that my daughter does not have as high tolerance to violence as I have, you know? And that her children will not have a high tolerance to violence. We've got to start dealing with this so that at that point then, if we reduce the tolerance to violence, then we reduce the incidence of violence.
Can I give a data point on that?
Yeah.
Of all the interventions that are put in place to prevent violence against women and girls, and again, this is regional data and some of it global, only 10% of prevention initiatives specifically target men and boys. That's already a very big red flag, yeah? And in terms of also countries that are providing training to police, which of course is one of the first stops, because even again, when we did these studies in Kenya over COVID, we found that about 35% of people report to the police station. Then maybe another percent, again, maybe 18, 17 or so, report to family members. And you know how that one goes down the rabbit hole, because tuliongea kama wazee and it dies there, yeah? But if many people are reporting to the police, which again is a plus, we're already at least understanding where we need to go with this information. Only 97 countries globally have provided training to the police to support survivors of GBV, right? This is already that's a problem. So if we're looking at who is receiving this information, that should be one of the first ports of call. But in terms of what we've tried to do judicially, I think we can also give Kenya some props because we have special courts for SGBV. And again, data is one of the things that I feel we're really more and more investing in, because without data, we can't have evidence-based decision-making, evidence-based policy-making. Yes, I know we don't want to overstate governance, but really without data, what are we hitting? Where are we even attacking this dragon, you know? But we have SGBV, special courts for SGBV, like in the hot points, Kisumu, Busia. I think the first was in Shanzu, there's Meru, I've said Busia already. Anyway, a couple others. Siaya, I think, is another one that has, I think it was the second one to have special courts. And these are some of the ways of expediting justice. Because if you look at Busia again and teen pregnancies, it's alarming. It is really, really high. And a lot of this is, again, from SGBV, not from peer-to-peer relationships of I have a boyfriend, I'm 15, he's 16, and we decided to do this. It's more of older men preying on younger girls. So I think it's something that needs to be hit from all angles, from home, from the church, like someone else has said, from parliament, from CSOs, from, you know, every which way that we can hit it. If we're going to call it an emergency, let's treat it as such.
I think I have a question then, also to the audience as well, and I'll paint a picture. So within the movement, when we were doing the protest last year, now that I've remembered, this is the very, very day we were brutalized in the streets for marching against femicide last year. When it was during International Human Rights Day, we had already marched for an end to femicide again, and the police responded with tear gas. That aside, what happens when men and young boys have no resolve when it comes to education around positive masculinity? What happens when the police system is not necessarily structured to take care of victims? What happens when health institutions don't have enough spaces to take care of victims and survivors? What happens when we don't inform the society enough? In fact, I feel like there's a big gap, and Doc, you can help us understand it, in how we really don't punish perpetrators for the crimes that they commit. Like a rapist can easily walk free. A child sex offender can easily walk free. They can get jobs. They can predominantly become a governor, and they won't even go to details. But we have Sharon's case. Where does a structure of system to recommend work? What does the solution lie when we're in such a state?
That's a very interesting question, but it's a very complex one also, because I think it almost demands a whole of systems response to SGBV. Because as you say, it's not just the woman who goes to the police who's failed, it's the one who goes to the hospital as well, the delays there that has failed, it's the one who doesn't have a shelter to run to, it's a person who goes back to the family and the family sends them back, and the delays in the court processes as well, even if we have dedicated courts for them as well. So I think we have to name this as a problem. It's a whole systems failure to respond to this issue. And I know there's a government responsibility. I think sometimes you always feel like we have to ask, what can we do as individuals? Because at the end of the day, it will boil down to our responsibilities as individuals who hold offices at the police station reporting desk, at the health facility where this man or woman comes seeking services, or the family where this woman seeks refuge. We all as individuals exist in this society that has normalized violence, especially violence against women and girls. And yes, it's good to ask, well, who's ultimately responsible? We are all responsible. Of course, the state has the biggest mandate. We are the people. We voted in the state.
And we pay taxes for security.
We pay the taxes for this security. So we expect the state to do something about it. But it's our responsibility as citizens to make sure that the government does what it's elected to be in place to do. It's also a responsibility to make sure that our local police stations do the work that they do. So I think my appeal is really to individuals who are listening, who hold positions in all these systems that we say are failing, and then it's easy to point fingers to somebody else. We are the neighbor. We are the police at the reporting desk. We are the church leader. We are the family members. We are the girlfriends and friends of the girlfriends and friends of the boyfriends as well. We exist in these systems of society, and I think for me that's where it really boils down to. Having said that, I think law enforcement really has to go to the top of that as well. Now, they say about the law that good people don't need it, and the people who don't follow it will not even follow it anyway. So what's the value of the law? The answer is that the value of the law is in the sanctions it imposes. So the law is not there to tell you what to do good or not. It's there to actually act as a deterrence to people who are inclined to resort to violence as the easy solution as well. So societies that function so that those people are good, and we're not going to wait for everyone to be good for us to eliminate violence against women and girls. The rule of law is to act as a deterrence for people. So when you look at self-efficacy, we talk about behavior change. What motivates people's behavior? People act the way they do by assessing what is the cost to me, what are the benefits. If we make it costly for gender-based violence to happen through the enforcement of the law to the letter, if people know that if they are violent, their neighbor will arrest them and take them to the police and demand that the police register that as a case that action is taken, then we actually start seeing a society where women start feeling safe. So it's a whole of systems failure, and ultimately it's we as citizens who have a responsibility, because we exist in those systems, to make the systems work. We are not short of laws, we are short of implementation, but because we are passing the buck.
Thank you, Doc. Recently, we had the case of Kananu in Meru, and I think I want to bring it to you, Sylvia, whereby it's a circumcision period within most of the time during holiday, and we're seeing a replica of cultural SGBV issues rising up. And I remember former Governor Mike Sonko, I think have we all seen it, right? We don't have to go into the details. In such a situation where culture is embedded in gender-based violence, how does society again walk back from these particular narratives? Or in places where we have sex for fish, like you have mentioned in the lakeside, or where we have child marriages, Kenya is back to FGM. Where do we separate culture? Where do we punish culture and erase culture when it continues to harm persons within this country?
Again, we go and make it a human rights issue. There's, I think, hardly a constitution globally that doesn't criminalize or at least castigate interfering with human rights. Yeah, and many of them actually recognize women and girls' rights as human rights. So where culture comes in and starts becoming opposing those very direct and clear laws, it's important that we look at those social norms and fix them however we will, because it's so interesting. You talk about child marriage, and actually our region, East and Southern Africa, has among, if not the highest child marriage rates in the world at over 30%. Some countries like Mozambique, it's at over 50%, which to us is just very confusing. Like in 2025, are we still really doing this? We saw the issue in Somalia the other day where men were up in arms because they were not being allowed to marry girls under the age of, I think, 16. Yeah, so these are things that we really need to look at in a much deeper way and really try and interrogate what are these social norms that are bringing us to this very dark place, and really just putting it on the table and saying that any civilized society, whatever the culture, has no place for violence, and least of all violence against women and girls. Right? And really that should be the mark of our civilization at a very big point. Because if we continue to allow this in the name of culture, in the name of, FGM, we've rolled back, and we're seeing some of this rolling back of the gains, but we really need, again, like Doc has said, to be very strong about deterring, on this. I'll give an example from Rwanda. One of the things they're doing, like to really ensure that perpetrators of GBV or SGBV don't just walk away scot-free. There's the Rwanda RIB, Rwanda Investigations Bureau, right, who work very closely with what they call the one-stop centers, which they call Isange, one-stop centers. Isange means feel at home in Kinyarwanda. So basically they have this place where you have the Rwanda Investigations Bureau, you have the medics, you have the law, who are able to all meet the victims in one place and make sure that they access justice without going too far. But even beyond that, now they've actually made it taboo to be a perpetrator of GBV. So rather than the victim being the one shamed, like, why were you wearing that dress? Why did you go to the Airbnb? Why did you drink the drink if you knew you were not going to sleep with him? It moves from that, and they're actually publishing the names of perpetrators, like even in domestic disputes, right? So if this man is known to be a wife beater, his name is all over. Right? So it's name and shame. And I think that's bringing about a cultural change where instead of the victim feeling shame, it's really the perpetrators. And by the time the men are looking at you and saying, hey, bro, you need to improve. We saw your name on that Fulani list. It's a deterrent. Yeah. So beyond the law, there's also just the human nature of wanting to be accepted and to be seen as a person of worth. And I think by pointing out some of these things and saying, look, we're not doing this as a society. So if you are doing it as part of our society, we need to shame you. Right? Then I think we can make some progress with that. Yeah.
Let's hear from the people. Let the people speak, right? Several hands here coming up. Somebody who hasn't spoken. Please, let's hear from.
He hasn't spoken. Yes,
contributed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Okeo David, and I would like to talk about the programs that our organizations do. You find that our organization mainly focuses on documenting, referring, and following up of these cases. So these organizations mainly focus on survivor-centered, and you find that it's only criminalizing the perpetrators and forgetting about the survivor's traumatic experience. Like, let's say I work at Dandora Community Justice Center. So after a victim has come to our offices and reported a case, I refer them to MSF, and they go and explain to the doctor. After that, they come back, and then I refer them back to the police station. They go and retell that story, and then you find that another police officer has just walked in, and then now that victim has to retell that story again, and then maybe the case goes up to court, and you say that most of the cases even take up to 4 years. So the victim has to retell the story over and over again, causing the re-traumatizing experience of retelling those stories. So we need to have a clear referral pathways at the community level, so that to prevent these survivors having to retell their stories every time they walk in, and also trying to curb the issues of GBV, trying to make men as allies. What do I mean? We have been collecting data. We have been talking about data that there are 56% of women being killed. There are 17%. Now, what are we doing with this data? Are we just going to mobilize resources from outside so that we just continue collecting this data, or have a call for action so that we can have this data to have programs that can help and curb GBV? What do I mean by this? Trying to educate men into understanding what is GBV. Because if you tell some men in the informal settlement what is gender, they can't give you a clear understanding of what gender is.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's get some final comments.
I'd like to ask a question to Okeo, because you say you're a GBV advocate and you do some of this work.
Yes.
When you interact with men and you're having that conversation on why they need to be aware of GBV and why they need to stop GBV, what's their reaction? What's the ordinary reaction that you get from men?
So first of all, they have a negative reaction because they feel that I am intruding their spaces. They feel that I am taking the side of women. So it's very difficult because they have that traditional masculinity that it's so rigid in them that they can't understand that women's rights are also human rights. So it's a conversation that we need to bring back to the men, because men are the majority of the perpetrators. So if we change the mindset of the men, at least we can cover at least up to 50% of the cases. Then we can also have men to speak up in terms of GBV.
Okay. At the back, yes.
Okay, good evening. My name is Steve Lochwitek, representing Kenyatta University, and I'm glad today I'm here. I've been learning and listening. GBV is a broad topic, and just like religion, whatever input or your thought you put in is right, so long as you're protecting and defending men, women, and children. Your thought is right. And to me, as an aspiring leader in future, I'll just take you back in the line of leadership, and maybe solution-wise, I will love to put this input. Me as Lodge, blaming GBV in this country, it starts and stops with our leaders. Our leaders take it as an advantage. During campaigns, they campaign with it as a slogan, but immediately after assuming those offices, they assume like everything is all right. Now, maybe in future, for us to have solutions to ending GBV as aspiring leaders, we have to elect people to this position who understand this topic and this problem much and deep, so that we can get a solution to this problem once and for all. Because we are electing ignorant leaders who doesn't understand anything to do with gender-based violence. Some of them are pro-women, some of them are pro-men, some of them neglect children at all. But you see, in law, we are being taught that selective justice is injustice. So gender-based violence, to women, they see that gender-based violence should be only focused on femicidal things, and women things. But to generalize, even children and women, we have been forgotten and we are really passing through a lot. So a cry for men, children and women, inclusive. When you see about the budget, during the budget allocation in the shelters, you get that most men are excluded, most children are excluded, and this one still bring much about the gender-based violence. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So, one comment, wind down. This gentleman, then the lady. Then we wind this down. We are out of time. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Turuka Samson. With me, on my view, I will just put it in two aspects. One, social. Natumai Kenya tuko na jamii mingi. So, out of jamii zenye tuko nazo, kila jamii iko na mila yao. Wakati kila jamii iko na mila yao, unapata kama kikwetu, kitambo tulikuwa tunaumia kama pande ya wasichana. Unapata msichana at the age of 8 babake anampelekea mwanaume. But because of at least we have got education, sahi unaweza pata mtu anasoma na anachagulia sehemu anataka oleke peke yake. Like unapata pia in some communities, unapata labda kama mtu ni msichana ama mvulana, hiyo kama pande za kukeketwa, unapata ni mila yao of which they cannot live it. So with me, gender based violence tunaweza sema ile msemo inasema muacha mila si mtumwa. Kwa hivyo if we leave that hizo vimila ziko hapo, then we could have closed that chapter. Then when we come to political unaweza pata mtu amedurumiwa, mahakama kesi imefika mahakama inachukua over 6 years. Over 6 years they just create a room chance ya kufanya corruption, of which that case it won't be haitafanyika kitu yoyote, because unaweza pata mtu amepewa mwingine ameenda amereport, kesi imefika mahakamani, then kufika mahakamani court ina rule with almost 2 ama to 3 4 6 baka hiyo miaka yote, of which sasa they gave them a room chance to make corruption, of which the victim cannot make maybe got a justice. Okay. So mimi naona hizo vitu zingine, but nashukuru sana.
Wachamila si mtumwa. You almost sneaked that in. Anyway, please.
Okay,
take us home. Tell us something that will take us home. Okay. The final comment.
My name is Michael from JQuat. I will say, first and foremost, we should stop victim blaming. People have normalized victim blaming to the point of we're saying, yes, you're doing something about GBV, but victim blaming is on a high rise to the point of these victims can't come up front to speak for themselves because they're ashamed that people will not understand them. And another thing, instead of victim blaming, let's shame the perpetrators at the sign of, as you've said, before it leads to death. There's the first time it was a slap, the next time it was a push, the next time it was a... And in a way we want to shame the perpetrators. Everyone should take accountability and responsibility. As a friend, you know your friend is violent towards the girlfriend or towards the wife. As a friend, you should take that accountability and shame him as a perpetrator. Let the world know. And so let us stop cushioning these perpetrators in the sense that they're our brothers, they're our friends, they're our sons. Mother-in-laws know here that their sons are beating up wives and they're cushioning them. That's wrong. Another thing, even in our social media this week, there's a content creator who came to social media and said, I will gladly go to prison for those 35 years because CBC children are actually beautiful. CBC children are looking good. I don't mind serving the 35 years. And people didn't do anything about it. And another man came and actually seconded him. And now you see, people won't do something about it. You will wait until now this man goes and sexually assaults this CBC child or violates this CBC child. That's when we'll do something about it. And we're forgetting that there were signs before. So let's stop forgetting about these signs when they're basic, because there's nothing basic about this thing, and it's rapidly coming to a national crisis.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for the contributions. I think this is always a heavy topic. But then again, we have come to the brink. Kenya has done its part quite phenomenally, actually, compared to our neighbors. There's more laws, stringent laws, but of course there's always a problem with enforcement. We still have underreporting. We still have limited safe houses. Forensic support is difficult. Trained officers are unavailable. Court delays continue to discourage victims. Cultural norms continue to stigmatize our victims as well, and women in general, including men. Technologically facilitated gender-based violence is on the rise. We're talking about 28.4% of partnered young women experience IPV in their age. And over 31,000 SGBV cases have been filed in courts between 2024 and 2025. Mind you, Nairobi National Hospital actually said that they receive more than 4,000 cases every month. Kenya has laws and plans, but I think the cases continue to increase. We are still losing lives through gender-based violence. The gap between policy and real protection remains extremely wide, and safety access and justice without barriers continues to look like a peak in the mountain. Therefore, as we continue to seek justice to the victims, real protection to Kenyans, real safety to our children, processes and systems that continue to protect us, we hope that the justice system, the healthcare systems, the safe spaces, femicide to be rendered a crime and a national disaster, economic injustices, mental health, and the overall good welfare of Kenyans must be appropriate in the looking in towards ending GVB and femicide in Kenya. And as we close the show, remember, safety begins with you. It begins with us all as citizens. And as we continue to hold accountable to our government, to our systems, let us remember that no woman is free until we are all free. Therefore, no Kenyan is free until we all are free. Have a lovely night. See you soon at The Last Word. Thank you so much for having us tonight. We'll see you once again.